Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts. Or
you made it to Friday. Welcome to the Friday edition of Balance of Power with the AI hangover on Wall Street and a holiday party hangover here in Washington. It better be Friday on Bloomberg Radio, satellite radio, channel 121, and streaming live on YouTube. Check it out right now. Search Bloomberg Business News Live. Unless you're ahead of the game, you might have YouTube TV. Flip over Bloomberg Originals. We'll meet you in the studio as we try to get our heads around what in the world is happening with this tanker that was seized in the Caribbean. And we're learning new information about it right now. By the way, one of the coolest things, we're going to do this in a minute, the map go function on the terminal, you can actually track that tanker just like you can any ship that's sailing its way around the world. President was asked about this a couple days ago now, remember? We seized the ship, but what happens to the oil on board? He said, well, I guess we're going to keep it. Here's what he said.
We're interested in the seizure of this tanker. Well, what happens to the oil on this ship?
Well, we keep it, I guess.
Where does it go? What port does it go to?
Well, you have to follow the tanker. You know, you're a good newsman. Just follow the tanker.
Do you know where
follow it. Get a helicopter and follow the tanker.
Is it true it's going to
But I assume we're going to keep the oil.
It's the best, I assume. Looks like we are, by the way, and I don't know that we're going to be able to burn that oil anytime soon. It looks like it's going to have to be held in escrow. We'll have more on that as we learn more. But Tyler Kendall is with us right now. We rescued her from the White House and pulled her into the Washington, D.C. bureau with the latest on this. Tyler, the story that Eric Martin broke has evolved quite a bit, and he's saying now it's just the beginning. So this is going to be a new reality, I guess, for us.
Right, exactly. Some incredible reporting from our colleague. People familiar telling Bloomberg News that this really marks the first step in a new phase for the U.S. as it puts pressure on Venezuela, but also Maduro. And this phase has to do with trying to essentially cut off the oil revenues for Maduro in a bid to get him to relinquish control. And that's really why we're going to be watching this closely, how it could evolve, because the Treasury Department earlier this week moved to sanction additional oil companies, additional tankers, and also some close associates of Maduro. So our understanding is Venezuela is actually preparing for there to be additional seizures of ships. And that's going to be really important to watch here. In fact, our reporting goes further than that, saying that the state oil company is trying to figure out alternate routes to make sure that they can get the crude to China, which of course is going to be a big factor in this, since China is such a huge buyer of this Venezuelan oil. In fact, I pulled some of the data. About 80% of Venezuela's export revenue comes from oil. And on average, they're exporting about 750,000 barrels per day this year, with nearly half of that going to Beijing.
Incredible. So, there could be 5 or 6 more based on what we're hearing. We sanctioned 6 more ships. Reuters is reporting a little more here. This tanker is too large to enter Houston's port. They're going to have to anchor this thing way off the coast and offload the oil. This is potentially a little more complicated than we were bargaining for here.
Right, and it's a lot of oil. So this particular tanker, we've been discussing this on the program. It's part of what's known as the dark fleet that helps to support Venezuelan oil exports. This particular tanker, also Iranian oil exports, has the capacity for 2 million barrels. Reuters reporting, apparently, according to the data and the satellite imagery, there's 1.85 million barrels on this particular ship. And again, the type of crude that is on it typically does go to China. So just another wrinkle to follow here. Now, you heard President Trump saying that he thinks that we will keep it. We should note yesterday at the White House press briefing, the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, did say that the U.S. does intend to seize the oil.
Fascinating stuff. Have you done MapGo? Have you seen how
it's awesome?
We were looking at the ships lined up at the ports coming out of COVID. Now we're following tankers that we've seized. It's all right there on the terminal. Tyler, thank you so much. We'll have more from Tyler Kendall coming up a little bit later in our second hour here on Balance of Power. Keep that in mind. If you're a terminal user, go there now, because we're going to talk this through with Adam Farrer, who pointed me to this yesterday. Our friend from Bloomberg Economics, senior geoeconomics analyst who worked in a prior White House, spending some time on this very issue. There have been a lot of questions about the legality and so forth, but also the logistics, and that's what we wanted to talk about with Adam, who joins us here in studio. Mr. Ferrer, it's great to have you with us, as always, on the Friday edition. Reuters updates the news. You had suggested maybe Galveston, somewhere this ship is going. Apparently Houston is the answer. But it's too big to get it in the port. What are they going to do?
So that's not unusual.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a VLCC vessel, as Tyler just went through, 1.8 million barrels of oil on board. I think the reality is those ships, ports aren't built for those ships to come in. Those ships stay at offshore piers, usually to load. And in this case, it will anchor off at a normal anchorage position, and that's where it will sit while a very complicated and messy legal process unfurls to determine the long-term position for the ship itself and the oil.
Wow. Do we have to hang on to the oil while this goes through the courts? The president seemed pretty nonchalant about this. He said, yeah, I assume we're going to take it and we'll burn it.
So we're missing a lot of details right now about how the Department of Justice plans to put forward their case on the seizure of the oil itself. It's interesting. Reporting now points to the closed warrant, the seizure warrant for this ship actually being based on the vessel's association with Iran, not Venezuela. And so as a result, there are just open questions as to what case they're going to put forward on the status of that Venezuelan oil, and therefore questions as to whether the U.S. really can seize it. But it will be likely held on the vessel and then pumped off and held in storage tanks until a court determines what to do with it.
Yeah, wow.
But what's also interesting is that the vessel itself, depending on legal wrangling and lots of questions about who's its actual owner, who chartered the vessel, whether the flag state was real, the flag of the vessel, who it was registered to, the vessel could return to service relatively quickly or could just sit for days, weeks, months, or years.
Well, so you just brought up a lot of questions, and if you're with us on YouTube, you can see U.S. Special Forces seizing that vessel a couple of days ago. It was pretty remarkable to see them rappelling out of this Black Hawk helicopter. And now, of course, the question is, what the heck do we do with it? And the White House is pointing us to the idea that there will be more. Is it possible in a scenario like this to confirm ownership or, in fact, where the boat was heading?
Well, so that's you're hitting in on the exact problem in the maritime industry and why we talk about these shadow fleets. It feels like in the 21st century, 2025, we could just know these things, right? We've got satellites, we're monitoring, we're tracking, but even things like the ship's AIS, or automatic information system, which is intended to track the vessel, provide safety of navigation, ensure ships don't hit each other, but also allow us to know where ships are headed, can be spoofed, it can be turned off, and that's how we see these ships playing games as to their ultimate destination.
And this one had its transponder off for some time, right?
That's right. Yeah. And as we saw, and for those who get on the terminal to look at MapGo, you'll see that the ship all of a sudden turned its AIS on right after it was boarded by this U.S. team. Wow. And now we can track it very easily.
Was this going to Cuba? Do we know?
Well, so that's what people are saying, but I think the ultimate destination may have been much further afield.
Really?
I think China, as Tyler had mentioned, is certainly on the table. So we just don't know. And certainly, I promise you that Coast Guard team that led this this boarding is asking and interviewing every member of the crew, going through their logs and working out all those questions.
Well, if when they stormed the bridge, couldn't they tell based on the instruments on the ship where it was going?
Yeah, certainly. I think they'd find some correspondence with the charter, the person who hired the vessel to do this trip. But also, these are sailors on board and professional captain. They're not going to sit there and they may obfuscate a little bit to hide certain elements if they're doing something particularly illegal, but the truth on that end will likely come out. The question is just when will we know about that?
This is wild stuff. I hope when they make the Netflix movie, Adam Ferrer is featured. This is our great source of information here from Bloomberg Economics. I really appreciate it. Fascinating. How much do we learn from Adam Ferrer? Who knew when it came to shipping?
Stay with us on Balance of Power. We'll have much more coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa,
this headline just went red. States to sue Trump over $100,000 H-1B visa application fee. This has been a pretty controversial idea, and it looks like it's going to court. Let's stick with Venezuela for a moment, though, knowing that this boat has been seized. And look, we've got another 6 tankers that have been sanctioned. So we could soon have our own shadow fleet, it sounds like. The president talked about this yesterday at the White House. Listen.
It's about a lot of things, but one of the things it's about is the fact that they've allowed millions of people to come into our country from their prisons, from gangs, from drug dealers, and from mental institutions, probably proportionately more than anybody else. So it has to do with a lot of things. They've treated us badly, and I guess now we're not treating them so good.
That's where we start our conversation with the gentleman from Massachusetts who has authored a War Powers Act that could soon hit the floor. Unless, of course, the speaker doesn't want to see that happen. This is a conversation that Democrats and Republicans are having here in Washington. Jim McGovern, Democrat from Massachusetts, ranking member on the House Rules Committee, with us in studio right now. It's really great to see you.
Happy to be with you.
Thanks for coming in, Congressman.
My pleasure.
You've introduced this War Powers resolution some time ago. Will it hit the floor soon?
Yeah, I expect to force a vote on it next week. It'll be ripe to be considered on Wednesday or Thursday of next week. We have Republican co-sponsors, Representative Massey and Representative Bacon and Marjorie Taylor Greene are on board on this resolution as well. Again, this is not a Democratic initiative. I mean, this is a bipartisan effort by those of us who actually believe the Constitution means something, and Congress has a role to play. And we don't want this president going into a war without a debate and without a vote and authorization by Congress.
Would this be specific to Venezuela or more broad?
It would be specific to Venezuela because that's the conflict we seem to be getting sucked into. Yeah. Although the clip you just showed of the president, he went on to further threaten Colombia, where he might do further action. But look, wars are easy to get into; they're hard as hell to get out of. And we have a history, of talking tough, of getting sucked into these wars that cost, billions and billions of dollars, and then we find ourselves in a quagmire that we can't get out of.
Now, I know for a fact that you understand the politics of the Caribbean better than most on Capitol Hill. You helped to begin normalizing relations with Cuba in the Obama administration. You've spent a lot of time in the region. So what do you think the president's aim is here? Is it regime change or something else?
Yeah, I think it's oil, quite frankly.
Yeah?
I think this president is not about promoting human rights. He doesn't give a damn about democracy. And this is not about drugs. I mean, he pardoned the former president of Honduras, who's one of the biggest narco traffickers in the world.
Hundreds of tons of cocaine.
So I think, there must be some financial interest in pursuing this policy for the president, because that's all he really cares about, making money for his family and money for those who are close to him. Look, our history in Latin America has been one of arrogance, has been one of putting profits ahead of human rights. And by the way, this administration doesn't give a damn about human rights. They just issued their national security strategy. And this is the first administration that has removed the word human rights from the strategy. So this is about Donald Trump's ego, and it's about, I think, oil. I think that's, at the end of the day, I think that's what it's about.
Is that why we're seizing tankers?
Again, it would be nice if we had a functioning Congress that would call his administration up and ask these questions like, why are we doing this? Why now? Again, this is not about drugs. More drugs are coming from Mexico and China than from Venezuela. So what is the strategy here? And the president's threatening, action on the ground in Venezuela. Now that's war. He's threatening to cut off, air traffic.
Says we're going to do the land.
Right. So
do you think that he would actually strike with ground targets in Venezuela?
Well, if he does, that's an act of war. Yeah. That's an act of war.
Is blowing up drug boats not an act of war?
Well, I think it is. We have some of my colleagues are debating that issue. But we're not only blowing up drug boats. It appears that we are guilty of serious human rights crimes by actually bombing survivors who are begging for help. Again, Congress ought to be demanding a clearly defined mission in terms of what he is doing in Venezuela. And up to this point, there have been very few questions, and he's provided very few answers.
You said something interesting, a functioning Congress. Yeah. Just back off what we're talking about here for a minute. We are in a world now where it does seem that discharge petitions and reconciliation bills are the only way to get anything done in the Congress. Do you feel that way?
Yeah,
You're on the Rules Committee. You know how this works.
Yeah, I mean, this Congress, under Republican leadership, does not function. It is not working. It is a terrible disservice to the American people. This is a place where trivial issues are getting debated passionately and important ones not at all. I mean, we have a healthcare crisis right now. People are seeing their healthcare premiums skyrocket. People are deciding to go without health insurance next year because the costs are so high. We need to be talking about extending the ACA tax credits so that people can afford their health insurance. And we're not doing that. We're talking about stupid stuff, stuff that is probably not even going to even be considered by the Senate, that is going nowhere. I mean, again, Congress, a functioning Congress means that we do the work of the American people. And I'd like to think, no matter, what your politics may be, making sure that we are addressing issues of affordability, which includes the cost of health care, are front and center. I mean, if the Republicans have a plan, then bring the plan to us. Let's debate it and vote on it.
Yeah.
They've got nothing.
Well, let's talk about health care, because Republicans put up a bill in the Senate yesterday. It failed. Then the Democratic plan failed. The Democratic plan, of course, would extend Obamacare subsidies. The Republican plan, produced by Bill Cassidy, would have health savings accounts. Congressman, I spoke with Nicolas Maduro yesterday, who has signed on to a bipartisan effort in the House, D's and R's, that would extend the subsidies, would add some eligibility controls as well. Because someone like Nicolas Maduro is not a fan of the Affordable Care Act, as she told us yesterday. Let's listen.
There's so much fraud here, which is why we think we have the proper balance. And this gives us enough time, by the way, to then work over the next year or two to be able to come up with something that can truly replace the Affordable Care Act and bring costs down. Now, what the Speaker and leadership are saying is that we're going to take up a health savings account measure, which will help people certainly with their medical costs, and I support that initiative, but it doesn't go far enough.
Okay, but this is unlikely to see the floor unless the discharge petition makes that happen.
And even if we do the discharge petition route, we won't be able to get to it until probably in early January.
Sure.
My question to Representative Malliotakis is, where the hell have you been? I mean, you're a Republican. Your party's in charge. We've been talking about this issue for months. This is not something
since before the shutdown.
Right, since before the shutdown, well before. We've been talking about it during reconciliation, right? So we go back months and months and months, and we've been saying we got to focus on this. And all we've been hearing from Republicans is oh yeah, we'll get to it, and now we're out of time. People are going to lose their health insurance. Healthcare ought to be considered a fundamental human right for everybody in this country. I mean, you need healthcare. If you don't have healthcare, you end up in an emergency room.
Right.
I mean, this is crazy. So look, there are a number of discharge petitions that have been introduced with various approaches to helping people afford their health insurance. I mean, let's figure out what the best one is and let's move on it. But the stalling and the excuses and the finger pointing, it has to end. We want to debate this issue. We want to vote on this issue. We want to help the millions of people in this country who are about to get screwed.
What's the conversation in Worcester, Massachusetts right now? If you stopped in Kelly Square and asked somebody about their health insurance, are they seeing these increases and dropping off the rolls? Or are they saying, I can't afford it anyway, so to your point, I'm going to go to the emergency room when I get a call?
So, I mean, we're hearing some really terrible stories of people basically saying, I can't afford my health insurance. Our office is getting inundated with calls. Look, people in Worcester just want us to do our job. And they get it. There are differences between Democrats and Republicans. But at the end of the day, they want us to get something done. You don't have to agree on everything to agree on something. But whatever that something is, it has to be about improving the quality of life for the people who live in Worcester and all around the country. And the problem with what the Senate did on the Republican side is the stuff that they're proposing, it doesn't mean anything in anybody's life. I mean, saying I'm fixing health care, but in reality not fixing health care, not making it more affordable, well, that doesn't help anybody, right? We ought to have a larger discussion on how we fix our entire healthcare system, because it's a mess. It's too for-profit oriented.
Yeah, okay.
But we're not going to do that in a week or two, right? Right now, we need to extend these tax credits so that millions of people don't see their premiums skyrocket and millions don't lose their health insurance.
We've only got about a minute left here. A terminal user just wrote us while we're talking. Ask the congressman why the ACA failed that they designed. Maybe I can reframe that a bit. A lot of Republicans come on the air and they say this thing was never affordable. Obamacare itself has raised premiums. Is this plan broken?
No, I think it's not perfect.
Yeah.
But it is better than the alternative, which is no ACA, right? I mean, the bottom line is millions and millions of people have coverage because of the Affordable Care Act. You know, if we extended the tax credits, it's affordable. But as I said, we need to have a bigger conversation. Look, if it was up to me, we would have a Medicare for all system. When I was the chairman of the Rules Committee, we were the first committee, neither the House or Senate, to do a hearing on Medicare for all. And I'll tell you, it was a very, very powerful hearing. But to fix healthcare holistically, it's going to take some time. In the meantime, let's extend those tax credits. Let's help people afford their health insurance.
Let's talk when the War Powers Act hits the floor. We've got a lot more to talk about, Congressman. Let's do this next time at Coney Island.
All right, I'm with you.
Onions or no?
Yeah, with onions.
With onions. It's the only way to do it.
Best hot dogs in the world.
They really are, too. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington. Congressman Jim McGovern of Massachusetts. This is Bloomberg.
Stay with us on Balance of Power. We'll have much more coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa.
You made it to the
Bloomberg
threshold
1130.
of the weekend. And if you're in Indiana, you might be a little worried about federal funding. Has the president found the line on redistricting? That's the big question today in Washington after the latest swing at the ball failed in Indiana. This is the latest state attempting to redraw its congressional map to try to favor Republicans in the midterm elections. We've been through this. Started in Texas, went to California. They've all been bound up in court, but I guess not the case in Indiana because the state Senate, with 40 Republicans and 10 Democrats, decisively rejected this whole idea to refit the congressional map. We talked about this just a couple of days ago with Congressman Stutzman from Indiana. Here's what he told us.
In Indiana, I think the maps were actually very favorable to the Democrats. If we're going to play partisan politics, Indiana is a 9-0 state. And so the Republican friends in the state legislature there need to realize we're in a national battle here. This isn't just about Indiana. It's a national battle where we need to be sure that there's equal representation in Washington for Hoosiers.
Well, not so much. Let's assemble our panel for their take on it, because this is an evolving story, and it's one that we're going to be talking about probably for many more weeks to come, with other states in the mix. See what they're doing in Virginia right now, the conversations that they're having even in New York. Bloomberg Politics contributor Jeannie Shanzano is here, democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center, and Rick Davis, Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital. Rick, how are we looking at this? Because if you read the commentary and the tip sheets in Washington, the angle that everyone is taking is Donald Trump finally hit the wall, that his influence has been checked by a Republican legislature. Is that the fact, or is this just another stop on the road to rewriting congressional maps all over the country?
I think it's probably more one stop on the road. I mean, there's obviously a lot more going on than just Indiana. And yet, at the same time, I mean, the president and the vice president were heavily invested in flipping the state to get better, pick up 2 extra seats. And so they kind of made it about them, right? They didn't do this discreetly. They didn't say, to the Senate pro tem, hey, Bray, why don't you pick up a couple of seats, and that would really help us out in Washington and be great for the state of Indiana. They really hit these guys hard, and for various reasons. More than 20 Republicans said no, and it wasn't just one person. It wasn't just a holdout. It was a pretty universal pushback from the Republicans there, and I think you could trace it to a lot of different reasons. One, some people just disagree with this kind of midterm redistricting. Two, a lot of people were threatened and didn't feel good about that and wanted to push back because they felt they were being treated poorly. Three, they worry about the consequences of diluting all these districts. You and I have talked about dumb redistricting. They are particularly worried about that, where you got a Trump plus 10 district, and all of a sudden, you lose. So there were literally dozens of different reasons for people to vote the way they did, and yet it's certainly looking like a big rebuke to the president.
Well, it's hard to not see it that way, I guess. Jeannie, this is a 31-19 defeat in a state that Donald Trump won by almost 20 percentage points. Is there an opening here?
Yeah, and I don't think Rick heard the president, because the president said, I didn't work too hard on that. I was barely involved in that. And look what happened.
Yeah.
The fact is, to Rick's point, there are a lot of reasons that people could have pushed back on this. One of them is just plain simple math. I mean, you look, Democrats are outperforming by 13% in off and special elections this year. If you take all those Republicans who are under 13% and then you say you're going to redistrict, you put people who might be safe at risk. So the math doesn't help this. But there's also the reality, if you're a Republican in Indiana and you're looking at Washington, D.C., what are you seeing for the last few weeks? Republicans pushing back on the president with absolutely no repercussions, from Epstein, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Pete Hegseth issue, healthcare. I mean, the list goes on and on, not just taking on Donald Trump, but Mike Johnson as well. So I think there's also a little bit of freedom here as the president's poll numbers are plummeting and Republicans are feeling emboldened to say, hey, I can't just follow this guy. I've got to watch my own back. This is what happens. And so the president has to wake up to that. And there's not a lot he can do. My understanding is that they try to primary these folks. That's after the midterm. I don't know how this helps Donald Trump.
Well, a lot of questions about the fallout here. Hashtag pass the map. In a post on Twitter yesterday morning, 10:30 a.m., it's been viewed almost 7 million times. This post was made when most people thought that it was likely to pass. Heritage Action, i.e. Heritage Foundation. Rick, the post says President Trump has made it clear to Indiana leaders, if the Indiana Senate fails to pass the map, all federal funding will be stripped from the state. Roads will not be paved. Guard bases will close. Major projects will stop. These are the stakes, and every no vote will be to blame. What's Indiana in for here, Rick?
Yeah, I must say, folks who I talked to who were involved in sort of monitoring what was going on in Indiana state legislature, when that hit from the Heritage Foundation, probably 3 Republicans at least switched their vote to vote against the measure because it angered them so much. So, I mean, I think all these things have consequences. Whether the president actually follows up on that, it wasn't a direct threat by the president. He has a way of making these threats and then not living up to them. It's kind of the domestic version of Taco. And the reality is all we can do is wait and see. Indiana is a core Republican state. Last thing you want is president, punishing Republicans for something that really is a non-material issue to most everyday voters.
Mm-hmm. It's another Free Taco Friday, I guess, Jeannie. So is the story the opposite of what the president said? To your point, he told reporters, I wasn't really working on that. Did he, in fact, overplay his hand?
I think he absolutely did. I think this was an unforced error on the part of the president. I think if you want to play politics, there was a way to do this rather subtly. You don't send the vice president out there to harangue people. You don't have your son going off on social media haranguing people. I'm laughing when you're talking about this heritage tweet or social media. Yeah. Kevin Roberts has a lot of problems over at Heritage. But what do we think Donald Trump is going to say? Probably the same thing he said on the campaign trail about Project 2025. I don't know who these people are. I never made this threat, never heard of the Heritage Foundation or Kevin Roberts. The whole thing is an unforced error on the part of the president and his team. We've always talked about the fact that redistricting at this point is a fraught endeavor, and you have to be careful what you wish for. Donald Trump went into this assuming that if he won these districts, that he could pull them through in the midterm. That is not necessarily the case. He would be far better off focusing like a laser beam on fixing the economy and prices and inflation than he would by going out and redistricting, which seems to, at this point at least, have started to backfire on him. With the loss of Indiana, they now look like they may just break even on this thing. If other Democratic states go further, they could even lose seats in this game. So this is not a good situation for the Republicans to be in. It will probably be a wash in the end, but it's a waste of time. He should have focused on what he promised, which was his economic agenda, and his poll numbers are falling through the floor at this point.
Jeannie points us right back to Rick's dummy mandering. If Republicans were so turned off by this yesterday, Rick, does this impact efforts in other red states?
It could. We've seen Kansas take a similar line, not really wanting to jump into this for some of the same reasons. And we've seen Democratic states. I mean, Maryland, the leadership in the state Senate there has actually sounded a lot like the leadership in Indiana. Democrats and Republicans can both feel the same way about monkeying with their districts. And so I do think there is, like the physics of politics, an opposite and equal reaction. California and Texas did their things, and now everybody else is sort of, geez, do we really have to walk the plank on this? It's really not healthy for our state politics. And so let's see. I tend to agree with Jeannie that at the end of all this, whether there's 1 or 2 seat advantage by either party is almost irrelevant to what we think is going to potentially happen in this election. And if you listen to the Republican National Committee chairman, he's predicting a dire outcome in the midterms. And so a couple of seats are probably not going to make that much difference.
Yeah, wow. Hey, Jeannie, I'm going to throw you a curveball. You said something that got me thinking a couple of minutes ago. I believe it was Epstein. You know what nobody's talking about in Washington? That deadline to release the Epstein files that came from a discharge petition signed by the president is 1 week from today. I know that the Democrats are trickling out more pictures, more photographs today showing Bill Clinton, Woody Allen, Donald Trump. But are we going to see the files in a week?
Alan Dershowitz. The list goes on, Joe.
Steve
Epstein,
Bannon.
He's like, the Steve Bannon. It's like a really, really bad situation for the White House. I'm going to be curious to hear what the president has to say if he takes questions from reporters at, I believe it's 3 p.m. You'd know better than I do at this bill signing. If he is going to take questions, I'm certain some of these pictures that the Democrats have released today, and there's a lot more to go, are going to come up. And some of them, including some that I can't name, they don't show anything illegal, but certainly things that people will find disgusting. And so what does the president do? I believe we have the 19th, the 20th. They're going to have to make a decision. And of course, we have a law that he must release, or the DOJ must release. My suspicion all along has been they will try to hide under an active investigation, but I'm not so certain that's going to be palatable at this point.
Just 30 seconds, Rick. Should Americans prepare to see these files unveiled next week?
Yeah, I get the impression it's kind of fallen off the front page to most Americans. Yeah. But obviously the run up to this on Friday of next week will start to get more and more intensity around it, maybe even after today's presser with the president at 3. So, yeah, I think that there are a lot of people, especially in MAGA, who want to see the truth.
Well, there you have it. That means everyone's going to be listening at 3. We'll see if the president's on time. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, live from Washington. I'm Joe Mathieu. This is Bloomberg. Thanks for listening to the Balance of Power podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already at Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find us live every weekday from Washington, D.C. at noontime Eastern at Bloomberg.com.